Saint of the day, Saint Alban, Protomartyr of Britain. His feast day is annually June 22nd. Butler's Lives of Saints, AD 303. The Christian faith had penetrated into England in the times of the Apostles and had received an increase by the conversion of King Lucius in the year 180. But the first persecutions seem not to have reached this island, where perhaps the Christians in times of danger retired to places distant from the Roman colonies or the mildness of their governors in a province so remote as to seem another world might sometimes shelter them. But the rage of Diocletian penetrated into these recesses, and many of both sexes here received by unheard of torments the crown of martyrdom, as Gildas and Bede testify. The first and most renowned of these Christian heroes was St. Alban, whose death was rendered more illustrious by many miracles and other extraordinary circumstances, and whose blood was an agreeable sacrifice to God, a glorious testimony to the honor of his name and to his holy faith, and a fruitful seed of divine blessings on his country. So great was the glory of his triumph that his name was most famous over the whole of the church, as Fortunatus assures us. A copy of the ancient acts of his martyrdom was published by Bishop Usher, and the principal circumstances are mentioned by St. Gildas and recorded by the Venerable Bede. Alban seems to have been a Roman name. Alban, as we know, Alban means white, and they used to call the ancient Britain, they used to call Alban, the people of Alban, because they were blonde and blue-eyed and very white-skinned. So the name of Britain in antiquity was Alban because of the populace there being blonde. Alban seems to have been the Roman name, and this saint seems to have been a person of note, as some ancient monuments quoted by Leland, Usher, Alford, and Cressy affirm. He was a native of Verulam, which was for many ages one of the strongest and most populous cities in Britain, till having suffered much by sieges under the Saxon conquest, it fell to decay, and the present town of St. Albans rose up close to its ruins, of which no vestiges are now to be seen, except some broken foundations of walls and checkered pavements, and Roman coins have been often dug up here. The river Verulam, west on the east, and the great Roman highway called Watling Street lay on the west side of the town. Alban traveled to Rome in his youth to improve himself in learning and in all the polite arts, as appeared by authorities which the judicious Leland produces. Being returned home, he settled in Verulam and lived there with some dignity, for he seems to have been one of the principal citizens of the place. Though a stranger to the Christian faith, he was hospitable and compassionate, and in a recompense of his charitable disposition, God was pleased to conduct him to the light of the gospel and to discover to him the inestimable jewel of immortal life. He was yet a pagan when the edicts of the emperors against the Christians began to be put rigorously into execution in Britain. A certain clergyman, called by some writers Amphivalus, sought by flight to escape the fury of the persecutors, and Alban afforded him a shelter and kindly entertained him in his house. Our saint was much edified by the holy deportment of his stranger, and admired his faith and piety, and in particular his assiduity in prayer, in which the faithful servant of God watched night and day. Alban was soon engaged to listen to his wholesome admonitions and instructions, and in a short time became a Christian. And with such ardor did he open his heart to the divine grace, that he was at once filled with the perfect spirit of this holy religion, and rejoiced that he had found so precious a treasure. He no longer regarded anything else, despite despising it for the whole world and life itself. He had harbored this apostolic man some days when an information was given in to the governor that the preacher of the Christian religion, after whom the strictest inquiry was making, lay hid at Alban's house. Soldiers were dispatched thither to make diligent search after the man of God, but he was then secretly fled. Christ promises that he who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet shall meet with the recompense of a prophet. This was fulfilled in Alban, who, by entertaining a confessor of Christ, received the grace of faith and the crown of martyrdom. He exchanged clothes with his guest, that the preacher might more easily escape in that disguise to carry the news of salvation to others, and himself put on the stranger's long robe, called caracalla. Alban earnestly desired to shed his blood for Christ, whom he had just learned to know, presented himself boldly in this habit to the soldiers, and was then bound and led to the judge, who happened at that very time to be standing at the altar, and offered sacrifice to his idols. When he saw Alban, he was highly provoked at the cheat which the saint had put upon him by substituting himself for his guest and ordering him to be dragged before the images of his gods. He said, "As you have chosen to conceal a sacrilegious person and a blasphemer, the punishment which he should have suffered shall fall upon you, in case you refuse to comply with the worship of our religion." The saint answered with a noble courage that he would never obey such an order. The magistrate then asked him of what family he was. Alban replied, "To what purpose do you inquire of my family? If you would know my religion, I am a Christian." The judge asked his name, to which he answered, "My name is Alban, and I worship the only true and living God, who created all things." The magistrate said, "If you would enjoy the happiness of life, sacrifice instantly to the great gods." Alban replied, "The sacrifices you offer are made to devils, who neither help their votaries nor grant their petitions. Whoever shall sacrifice to these idols shall receive for his reward everlasting pains of hell." The judge, enraged beyond measure to these words, commanded the holy confessor to be scourged, and seeing him bear with an unshaken constancy and even with joy the most cruel tortures, he at last commanded him to be beheaded. An exceeding great multitude of people went out to behold his execution, and the judge remained almost alone in the city without attendants. In the road was a river, and the stream in that part, which was pent up by a wall and sand, was exceedingly rapid. So numerous was the crowd that was gone out before, that the martyr could scarcely have passed the bridge that evening, had he waited for them to go before him. Therefore, being impatient to arrive at his crown, he went to the bank and lifted up his eyes to heaven, made a short prayer, and upon this the stream was miraculously divided, and the river dried up in that part, so as to afford a passage to the martyr and 1,000 persons. This river must have been the Colne River, which runs between Old Verulam and the new St. Albans. The executioner was converted at the sight of this miracle and of the saintly behavior of the martyr, and throwing away his naked sword, he fell at the feet of the saint, begging to die with him, or rather in his place. The sudden conversion of the headsman occasioned a delay in the execution. In the meantime, the holy confessor, with the crowd, went up the hill, which was a most pleasant spot, covered with several short sorts of flowers, about 500 paces from the river. There, Alban, falling on his knees at his prayer, a fountain sprung up, with the water whereof he refreshed his thirst. A new executioner being found, he struck off the head of the martyr, but miraculously lost his eyes, which fell to the ground at the same time. Together with St. Alban, the soldier who had refused to imbue his hands with his blood and had declared himself a Christian, was also beheaded, being baptized in his own blood. This soldier is mentioned in the Roman martyrology. Capgrave calls him Heraclius, some others Heraclius. Many of the spectators were converted to the faith, and following the holy priest who had converted St. Albans into Wales, to the number of 1,000 received the sacrament of baptism at his hands, as Hapsfield's memoirs relate. But these converts were all cut to pieces by the idolaters of their faith. The priest was brought back and stoned to death at Radbourne, 3 miles from St. Albans, as Thomas Radbourne, who was born in that place, Matthew Paris, and others affirm from ancient records kept in St. Albans Abbey. This priest is called by Geoffrey of Monmouth and others Saint Amphivalus, though Bishop Usher conjectures that Greek name to have been borrowed from his garment, the Caracalla. Bede testifies that St. Alban suffered martyrdom on the 22nd of June, some say in the year 2086, but most say it was the year 3003, when Diocletian began his great persecution, to which Constantius put a stop in Britain the year following. Some moderns are offended at the above-mentioned miracles, but the ingenious Mr. Collier writes thus concerning them, quote, "As for St. Alban's miracles, being attested by authors of such credit, I do not see why they should be questioned. That miracles were wrought in the church at that time of day is clear from the writings of the ancients. To imagine that God should exert his omnipotence and appear supernaturally for his servants in no age since the apostles is an unreasonable fancy. For since the world was not all converted by the apostles, why should we not believe that God should honor his servants with the most undisputed credentials? Why then should St. Alban's miracles be disbelieved, the occasion being great enough for so extraordinary an interposition? These miracles of stopping the river and of the spring rising in the place where St. Alban was beheaded are expressly mentioned by Gildas, Bede, and others. The place was called in the Anglo-Saxon language Holmhurst, Hurst, signifying a wood, and this place was once overgrown with trees, as Bishop Usher proves. In after times it obtained the name of Durswold Wood, and was the spot on which the present town of St. Albans is built. In the time of Constantine the Great, a magnificent church of admirable workmanship was erected on the place where the martyr suffered, and was rendered illustrious by frequent great miracles, as Bede testifies. The pagan Saxon destroyed this edifice, but Offa, king of Mercians, raised another in 793 AD with a great monastery, on which he bestowed most ample possessions. Several popes honored it with the most singular privileges and exemptions, and all the lands possessed by it were freed from the payment of the Ramiscot or Petterpence. The church is still standing, having been redeemed from destruction when the abbey was suppressed under Henry VIII. It was purchased by the townsmen to be their parochial church for the sum of £400, which according to the present value of money would be about 7 times as much. Our island for many ages had recourse to St. Albans as its glorious protomartyr and powerful patron with God, and acknowledged many great favors received from God through his intercession. By it, St. Germanus procured a triumph without Christian blood, and gained a complete victory both over the spiritual and corporal enemies of this country. Of the rich shrine of St. Alban, most munificently adorned by Offa, by his son Egfrig, and many succeeding kings and others, nothing is now remaining, as Weaver writes, but a marble stone to cover the place where the dust of the sacred remains lies. Over against which on the wall some verses are lately painted, says the same author, to tell us that there was formerly a shrine in that place. A village in Forez in France, a league and a half from Rouen, bears the name of St. Alban, famous for mineral waters abounding with nitrous salt, described by Mr. Spoon and Piganiol. This is MLA citation. Lives of the Fathers, Martyrs, and Principal Saints. Catholic Saints Info Timeline, 1866. Now, he's depicted with a suit of armor and a sword because of the fact that he was a soldier. And his image has him carrying a very large cross and a sword. And this is the hymn that the Christian Orthodox Church sings for St. Alban's feast, and the prayer for him. In his struggle, your holy martyr Alban gained the crown of life, O Christ our Lord. For strengthened by you and in purity of heart, he spoke boldly before the judge of this world. offering up his head to you, the judge of all. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.